Welcome to Southern Sense Talk on Rumble. You are going to love Annie the Radio Chick-A-Dee Ubelis and her co-host, C.S. Bennett. You'll find them live here on Fridays from 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Date Time. Check out their website at Southern Sense, as in commonsense.net. It's that easy, southernsense.net. So sit back and relax. They're informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey.
Welcome back to another adventure here on Southern Sense. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, Annie the Chick-A-Dee, along with my guest co-host, the wonderful, the vivacious, the oh-so-intellectual Hannah David with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIRUS.org. Good afternoon, Hannah, and welcome back. It's always fun to see your smiling face.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I mean, we had fun when I was with you a number of years ago when you were with Heritage, and we were lobbying for HR2, which still has not gotten passed. So we had fun to finally meet face to face. I love doing that because you see people on the screen and you get to know them, but when you actually see them face to face, that's special. So You're special in my life.
Same here. Likewise.
Well, we got a lot to talk about. We got great guests. Someone that you work with, Nicholas Softy. God, how did he end up with that last name growing up? I'm sorry, Nicholas. But anyway, he took over your job as the state and local field representative. And now... weren't you that?
No, I was the state and local policy analyst. So now I'm the investigations manager. Yeah, so Nick has always, we've for the longest time worked on the same team, but he's always done the outreach portion of things. So totally different wheelhouse.
Okay, my bad. Here we go. Slap me on the hand.
You're good.
And we also have the director for operations, and I'm going to get this all correct, completely wrong, but is the... oh, geez, why do I am having a brain fart? The Human Trafficking and Training Center, Daniela Lisco. Because I see the initials, I'm going, what the heck is ATTC? Yeah, it's the Human Trafficking Training Center. And this is something I've never heard about, but what they do is they go into various agencies and like law enforcement or medical services or anything like that, or even community services to help identify victims of human trafficking. Yeah. And this is all going to weave into everything we're talking about with illegal immigration as well as human trafficking and the budget cut to our nice federal government, which you have been covering. I mean, it is like a free-for-all out there.
It is. And unfortunately, it's boiled down to healthcare for illegal aliens. And it looks like they're at a standstill. The last time I was researching it, which was just a few minutes ago, they're going to move the shutdown into next week as well. So they haven't come to an agreement on either side of the aisle. I do know that we've had some people from the left join the right, people like Fetterman, people who are a little bit more likely to see common sense, I guess. But no, we're still at a standstill. And it really boils down to healthcare for illegal aliens. That was something that during the Obama administration with the Affordable Care Act, he granted healthcare for illegal aliens to DACA recipients. And then, with the previous administration, the Biden administration, he really relaxed criteria, I guess is the best way to put it, and allows anybody under the sun almost. We've got people who have claimed asylum or parolees, people with temporary protected status, refugees, DACA recipients, all of them are eligible for some type of medical coverage. And then, of course, they're all eligible for emergency medical coverage, but that's a different wheelhouse. It's a separate issue. And so what it's done, it's cost the states, it's cost the taxpayers. It's $1 billion industry. I mean, it's so expensive. And we've already got, I think, what is it? We spend $5 trillion a year in healthcare for legal American citizens already. Can you imagine adding 18 million illegal aliens to that equation? I mean, we can't afford it. And it's not a one-time expense either. It's a perpetual obligation, and it's just boiled down to that's the root of the issues that we have right now, and that's why the government shut down.
Well, we're saying 18 million illegal aliens that we know of.
Yeah.
And there's a countless, probably several million more that we don't know of. I mean, when I was talking about this 10 years ago, we were estimating 10 years ago, 20 million present. We don't know how many are actually present. So we're assuming we've got 18 million that we're aware of. But what people don't understand is that I think it was like 30 some odd years ago, we passed healthcare legislation so that if someone were to show up at an emergency room, they must be taken care of, whether they're here legally or illegally. And when that happens, the hospital issues them a Medicaid identification card, which they can use further to get health care down the road at a doctor's office or whatever. So here we have people being issued Medicare cards, but here they are illegally that we may not be aware of.
Yeah, the gotaways is a whole other issue, and it's a serious one. These people, especially under an administration where they had such lax border policies, they were essentially non-existent. The people who are coming in illegally on top of that, they're the ones you got to look out for, because I can guarantee that if they had tried to get in legally, legally as in under the Biden era policies, they would have been able to. So the gotaways are the ones we got to look out for. They're the drug smugglers, the human trafficking smugglers, So I do think our guest later, it's going to be interesting to talk to her. But yeah, when it comes to emergency Medicaid services for illegal aliens under the Biden administration, we spent as a nation over $16 billion. And that's a lot, and I'm not saying that necessarily needs to change. We, as America, we've set the precedent that if someone comes into an emergency room and they're hemorrhaging, or, she's pregnant, and just because of their, legal status, we're not going to turn them away. That's not who we are as a country, and I don't think that we should be. But that comes with an expense, and adding on to that expense for people who are just illegally present here to begin with, and they don't have emergency medical needs right then. We can't do it. It's we'll fall just like Rome, but we'll fall financially first.
Yeah, because as a former law enforcement officer, we would take these aided cases, we called them, help them to the hospital and help them get checked in. And there are time and time again, we knew someone was here illegally, but we were not allowed to report them because this was just an aided case. This was not someone who perpetrated a crime. They may have been a victim of a crime, or they may be ill for whatever, or pregnant, as you say. But you see them pull out of their pockets or their wallets or their purses multiple Medicaid cards with different names on it.
Yeah.
So, it is a thing that the public is not aware of. So when we're saying that we need to cut off the aid to illegal immigrants in medical care, it is cost us, as you said, billions that we know about.
Yeah. Look what it did to California. They went to a deficit. I've spoken to you about it before. I've spoken on other radio shows about it too. They went into a huge million, I believe it was in the billions deficit because of the sheer amount of illegal aliens they have present within their state. And they just can't keep up. And, and it all falls back, to advance this open borders agenda. It all falls back on the American taxpayer. We give up fiscal reasoning at the cost of the American taxpayer. And it's a shame that the government has shut down because of it, because it seems so common sense, right? To you and me and to other people probably tuning in, that we shouldn't be subsidizing healthcare for illegal aliens. But, other people in control think the exact opposite. But we see what it does to their cities. We see what it does to their states when they allow it, these sanctuary states, when they do this. And, it all goes to hell in a handbasket. And we, as a conglomerate, as the 50 states, we can't let that happen.
No, and if we're spending this healthcare money with illegals, what happens to the veterans? What happens to the senior citizens? What happens to the legal citizens, those native to this nation that need Medicaid care, the children, the single moms, households like that? What happens? Their aid will get cut to funnel it to help someone that should not be here in the first place. So yes, it's a common sense thing. And all we're doing is encouraging them to self-deport themselves. And if they do that, then they can return legally in a short period of time. They don't have to wait a long time. They just reapply to come in, but walk in legally. And then they're eligible for all the services we offer at that point legally.
Yes.
It's just a common sense thing.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you, Annie. I do think that if we stop incentivizing migrants to come to certain states or come to America as a whole, they're not going to. If we stop giving them driver's licenses, if we stop giving them medical coverage or food stamps, they're not, or housing assistance and daycare assistance. I mean, the list is long. If we stop doing that, no one's going to want to come here. They'd rather do it legally. They'd rather wait their turn in line and get here legally and get the little bit of handouts that we do give people like that who appear. But yeah, if we stop incentivizing it, and that's why sanctuary states have so many illegal aliens, because they incentivize them to go there. That's why Oregon and Washington and Cali, that's the way they look the way they do in comparison to, say, West Virginia or Florida, because they're not going to honor a driver's license from another state. They're not going to shell out taxpayer funded, medical coverage. And so they go to sanctuary states. But if we stop incentivizing, that's the first thing we need to do. And I actually think it's a good thing that we're having this debate on the federal level. If we can change that out and hopefully it doesn't, stay at a standstill like it is now. But if something can give, then that's the first thing, start from the top to the bottom.
Yeah. Well, before we run out of time in this first segment, those that watch the show know that we start each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And today's dedication is going to Captain Helio Armando Garcia III of the South Fulton Police Department in Georgia. His end of watch was Wednesday, April 16th of this year.
Breaking news right now, a South Fulton police officer is dead following a very bad crash overnight. Atlanta News First Don Shipman is live right now. He's with the First Alert Breaking News Tracker. Don, you're at Grady Memorial Hospital and you spoke with South Fulton's police chief. What is the police chief saying?
Well, definitely heartbroken. The entire department is heartbroken. And I just learned that this officer actually helped to build the South Fulton Police Department. With the department more than 6 years, he was rushed here to Grady Memorial where he died from his injuries. His name is Helio Garcia, a lieutenant with the department for just over 6 years. And take a look at the scene right here. This is what we've been learning from police. Authorities are saying that Lieutenant Garcia was on duty in a department-issued vehicle when another driver veered into his lane and struck his vehicle head-on. Garcia's patrol car badly damaged in this crash. This happening on Flat Shoals Road near Connell Road right around 11:30 last night. Authorities are still gathering information. We're told the Georgia State Patrol is now lead on this investigation, but the police chief with South Fulton did tell us moments ago that he's not ruling out alcohol as a factor in this crash, saying that the driver of that other vehicle may have been drunk. That driver was also hurt in the crash, taken here to Grady Memorial Hospital. Their conditions is described as critical. Now, Lieutenant Garcia leaves behind a wife and 3 children. We're live here at Grady Memorial Hospital. Don Shipman, Atlanta News First.
Authorities have moved the woman accused of killing a South Fulton police captain in a head-on crash to the Fulton County Jail. 31-year-old Centoria McLean faces several charges, including homicide by vehicle and reckless driving. Police say she crossed the center line and hit Captain Helio Garcia's patrol car. This was back in mid-April. McLean had been held in custody at the hospital for more than a month. She remains in jail tonight without bond. She's set to make her first court appearance Friday. Well, tonight, South Fulton police paid tribute to Captain Garcia and all other families who have lost loved ones in the line of duty. We also heard tonight from his widow as his department marked National Police Week. Fox 5's Eric Mock was there. He's live with the latest. Eric, you said there were a lot of hugs and tears tonight.
Absolutely, Eric. There really was not a dry eye among the crowd that was gathered here outside this South Fulton Police precinct. You know, we had family members, close friends, and a lot of brothers and sisters in blue who all, came together to honor the life and sacrifice of Captain Helio Garcia. Now, a lot of these people here, lit candles as part of the way to pay tribute to him. Family members, including his daughter and wife, spoke to the gathered crowd about how much they're going to miss him. Then officers who worked under him him shared how much they were going to miss him and how he always had their backs, was always there for them, and helped mentor them through what is a tough career. Now, Garcia, of course, died in that head-on crash with 31-year-old Centoria McLean, who we just told you has been charged with causing his death. Now, it's clear his loss has left a gaping hole in his family, this department, and in the South Fulton community, fighting to hold back tears. Garcia's wife, Eliana, told us just what kind of a person he was in life.
He's a father, he's a husband, he's a friend, he's a hero. He's an amazing man, a man that was always concerned about his loved ones, his friends, and especially the community.
And speaking of the community, she said actually on the night that Garcia was killed, he had actually worked to feed a homeless individual he encountered. Some city leaders were also here and addressed the crowd. Now, Eliana thanked all the people who were gathered here and said the community support in the wake of his death has just been overwhelming for them and has really helped keep them up during this tragic time in their lives. Now, Police Chief Keith Meadows said they are working on a way to try to forever memorialize Garcia's service for this city and this department. For now, reporting live in South Fulton, Eric Mock, Fox 5 News.
All right, Eric, thanks so much.
It has now been 1 month since a South Fulton police officer was killed. Captain Elio Garcia died in a crash while he was on patrol. Over the weekend, his life and legacy were remembered during a candlelight vigil at the very precinct that he helped build. Angelina Salcido has more.
In South Fulton, a community came together under candlelight to honor Captain Elio Garcia, a police officer, husband, and father killed in a head-on crash last month while on duty. His wife says he lived with compassion and led with heart both at home and in uniform.
He's a man that would literally take off his shirt and give it to you. A man that would be next to you through the good and the bad. A man that would always come home.
Captain Garcia's daughter, still processing the loss, says the silence at home has been overwhelming.
It's so quiet, and there's no one to tell us jokes or to tell us how beautiful we look when we come down the stairs for special events. And I just always have to remind myself that he's always with us and with everyone else.
Captain Garcia was one of the founding members of the South Fulton Police Department, serving from patrol to internal affairs. But more than his titles, it was his heart for the community that stood out.
He wore his badge with pride and love and dignity and respect.
Angelina Salcido, 11 Alive News.
On April 16th, 2025, Lieutenant Helio Garcia was killed when a vehicle veered into his patrol car on Flat Shoals Road in South Fulton, Georgia, at 11:30 p.m. He succumbed to his injuries early the next morning at Grady Memorial Hospital. With over 6 years at SFPD, he helped shape the agency. He leaves behind his wife and 3 children. Rest in peace.
Attention all units, attention all units. Show this unit 10-7. 10-7 gone, but not forgotten.
Let it be said, when we finish this race, we kept them free. We led with grace. Let it be seen from sea to shining sea. Beautiful America, living our legacy. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother. Oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation, for the next generation. Let us be known as people of honor, humble and bold, faithful through fire. eager to listen. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother. Oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation. For the next generation. Let us make room. Let us reimagine. Welcoming voices with true compassion. Let's craft a world with hopes and dreams. Challenges known, those still unseen. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother. Oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation. For the next generation. Let us be sure when our time has come, we gave them hope, we made them strong. Let it be said when we finish this race, we kept them free, yeah, we led with grace. Father, mother, sister, brother. Oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation. For the next generation. Let it be said. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother. Oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation. For the next generation.
All right, and we're back. You're watching Southern Sense on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Rumble, Substack, and our homepage, which is southernsense.net. And I got that working again. I haven't figured out how to keep it there permanently, but I got it working again.
There you go.
Yep. At least I was able to do something. All right now I'm touching the ceiling. That didn't work out too well. Hey, listen, before we went on through that, the dedication, you and I were talking about the budget, and I pulled up this thing from the conservative column, which is online news, if you want to call that a commentary. And they were talking about the rant Chuck Schumer just went on recently about the budget debate. And he was dropping F-bombs left and right. There was once a time where you had civil conversation, but now it seems to be the fad that everyone has to curse, like the average steel worker or coal miner. I mean, Jasmine Crockett started it, and now you've got Chuck Schumer. And they were playing a clip of The View on Newsmax, and I almost died laughing because the women on Newsmax were bragging about how they were getting cursed out and how they were cursing back. I don't know. I grew up where, if you cursed, your mom turned around and washed your face out with soap, you
Yeah,
know?
you've got to have some class and some decorum. I mean, and Chuck, he's the same guy who said every day it gets better for us and of course he was talking about negotiations on the floor regarding the government shutdown, but he just doesn't realize how he comes across because every day that we have the shutdown, it's not getting better for the American people. And so between that and, the slip ups with the cussing, I mean, something's got to give. There used to be some class up on the hill, and it seems like it's gone to the wayside, and it's unfortunate. I know they say that people who curse more have a higher IQ, but I don't believe it.
I don't either. And it's just for the lack of words to be able to express yourself
Yeah.
with dignity and get your point across poignantly. I pulled this out and I said, it's got to be something I got to talk to you about. But you said, we're in day 10 right now.
Mhm.
And as I understand, I hear on the 16th, there's planned a massive rally by the liberal left to help prolong this. Now, I think back to under the Obama administration where they had the massive shutdown, and a friend of mine actually went down. He was the one that was actually cleaning the parks, emptying the garbage cans and everything. He ran for a House seat here that Nancy Mace has. He's still active, but he was there cleaning the monuments. The World War II veterans went down there. The Vietnam War, Korean War veterans went down there, opened the gates and opened the parks back up. But we're looking at that once again. But when we're looking at this with 820,000 government workers screaming and probably protesting, when the government shuts down, what people don't realize is that government response to certain things like cyber attack or anything that attacks the United States, you've got a shadow government right now working in these agencies. So it leaves us open to cyber attacks by our enemies. We already know they've attempted to attack our water and electrical grids.
Yeah.
So we're wide open now. Now they can check our internet and other cybersecurity things that are left wide open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I understand why people are mad on both sides of the aisle. But shutdowns, unfortunately, in American history aren't unprecedented. I mean, we've been shut down under Clinton, under Obama. We've obviously been shut down under Trump now for both terms. But they do end. And I don't think, DC here, we're the protest capital of the world, but it's when they turn violent. And we see that a lot with ICE protests, or the No King's Day protests. They tend to turn violent. You get this mob mentality and this mob rule. And I would hate to see that happen in the city. But then on the flip side of that coin, unfortunately, we do have, soldiers, active military. We have the National Guard here that may be able to kind of squash anything that's getting out of hand. But it's unfortunate that we've even had to be shut down over something that, like I spoke to you earlier about, it seems just like a common sense thing. We shouldn't be giving healthcare to illegal aliens. But yeah, I hope that there's no violence. I hope nobody loses their life, nobody's cars are broken into, nobody's businesses are wrecked, because that tends to be what happens when people protest. So, but yeah, I mean, like I said, we're the protest capital of the world. There seems to be a protest every other day. Funny enough, I was driving out of DC a couple of days ago and I saw an anti-ICE protest. Literally right next to them was people holding signs that, were supporting ICE and supporting the government, the current administration. So everybody's got something to say in the city, that's for sure. But let's just hope that it's violent.
Well, my small town, I was coming back from south of Charleston. I had a procedure test on my back, which was successful. Fingers crossed, I'm waiting to hear back from the doctor. And if that gets done, they're going to go in and fix an area of my back where I can at least bend over and put my shoes on.
Yeah, that's the goal.
That's the goal. I want to be able to put my shoes and socks on. But, I was driving back, and in my town, I'm coming through one of the main intersections, and there's that anti-ICE protest. And they're waving, I don't get this, they're waving the Ukrainian flag, as well as these anti-ICE signs and everything else. I don't know what that has to do with that. But I was driving through it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Really? This is small town USA, and it hits each and every one of us. And we don't realize this. I mean, the flight attendants are going nuts because they have no TSA security. They're on a skeleton crew.
Yeah.
Flights are being delayed. So this is going to affect commerce throughout the rest of the United States. Just imagine now government workers that are manning toll booths and everything else not getting paid.
It's
Traffic's
affecting
going to
air
slow
traffic
down.
control. Like
Yeah,
I
and it
saw
will
somewhere in
affect,
Nashville. Yeah.
yeah. So, it's just, it is a massive shutdown of the federal government on all levels, and it's leaving our security wide open. One of the things that was scaring me is there's a massive comet the size of a Manhattan that is aiming towards us. It's going to come around the back end of the sun, but if we don't get government open, we're not going to know where that comet is going to go when it comes around the back end of the sun. It's going to aim for us, Do we head for the hills?
I'm just now hearing about this from you too. I didn't know.
Yeah. So I forget what the name of
That's
it was. They
scary.
gave it a number or something. But yeah, and we've got a lot to talk about Antifa because there's a guy that defected and he's blowing the whistle on it, on stuff that goes back to like 1999 and how he got recruited
Yeah.
and taught how to make Molotov cocktails, and he had him in his bedroom in college being recruited. There's a lot of scary stuff out there. But with that said, we would like to bring along the one, the only, the man about town, if he's got his headset on. I don't know if he does, and I just put myself out of the picture. Nicholas Softy. Good afternoon, Nicholas. How you doing? Surprise, surprise.
Doing good, Ann. How are you?
All right. My camera likes to play games with me, likes to shrink me, put me up, put me down. I never know where I'm going to be. But you are also with FAIR, with Hannah Davis, and the two of you have worked close together. And it's a great organization that is the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And we're seeing stuff I never thought I'd see, how we have these massive anti-ICE protests. And you actually have police agencies refusing to cooperate with them. As I understand, yesterday, the Portland police were cheering on the anti-ICE protesters. I'm sorry. I'm ashamed that they wore the same badge I wore. I am ashamed that they did that. And I can't believe that a police agency would do something like that.
Yeah. That's sanctuary city policing for you right there.
Yeah, totally. And these anti-ICE, can you hear me, Ann?
Yes, we got you loud and clear.
Totally. So first of all, thank you for welcoming me onto the show. These anti-ICE, I don't like to call them protests because they're obviously riots. The intent of these are to disrupt the work of federal law enforcement agents, ICE agents, Border Patrol, and specifically the anti-ICE riots we're seeing in Portland and Chicago. They represent a reckless and destructive assault on the rule of law. Congress passed this federal law and these federal statutes so they can enforce public safety and the integrity of our nation's immigration system. And a lot of these, Antifa types, these open borders types, are really doing their best effort to undermine the territorial sovereignty of the nation and to undermine the foundational principles of what make this country stand strong. And it's an attack on American exceptionalism. And it's basically saying that America does not have a right to secure its own borders and that it shouldn't even have borders to begin with. It's the whole, no borders on stolen land type of thing. And these people are, rightly so, as President Trump just recently declared, domestic terrorists, and they are a danger to the domestic tranquility of this nation.
Yeah, and looking at these protests, I had to turn around and pull up the shots on my computer and freeze it. And what I found interesting, it's not just Antifa, it's not just anti-ICE protesters, but you got, pro-Palestinian protesters mixed in there. You've got the transgender community in there. And it is like, if you take anyone with some sort of a mental illness in the United States, you will find them in those protesters there. It just makes no sense that you don't leave your doors and your gate open on your own private property. The United States is our private property, and they want us to leave the doors open. I'm sorry, if you want these illegal immigrants right there, why don't you take them into your home? Why don't you pay for the medical care and their education and their food? Oh, you don't make me take them in. Am I making sense?
I'm
Totally.
following.
I'm in awe. I'm in awe. You're doing the job for me. I love listening.
I think, and speaking of Antifa, and I think they were involved in attacking the ICE facilities out there in Portland, Oregon, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you saw them actually winging Molotov cocktails and stuff at the police and the federal vehicles that were coming through. And like I said, it just blows my mind that they would have the local police agencies stand down.
Yeah.
I still run a tea party, as Hannah knows, for the last 16 years, and I had the local sheriff in, who happens to be a friend of mine, and he was defending bringing in the project or program 287G that ICE has, that under certain circumstances, if you're an aided case or if you're a victim of a crime, we're not going to haul you in and toss you out of the country. But if you are a perpetrator of the crime, then we're going to go after you and we're going to haul your ass in, excuse my language, and then kick your butt out. But they don't see it that way. It's like, how dare you? And they don't understand. You're not going to be breaking down doors on individuals that, haven't committed any crime yet. And then we also offer you the chance, if you feel like you want to stay here in the United States, we offer you a self-deportation, and then we'll help you migrate in here legally. We're giving them a helping hand, and yet we're looking like we're the bad guys.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the 287G program is a really great program. I think more sheriffs and jail systems, correction facilities, they need to use it. And but what it does for people listening who might not be privy to it, it allows for the safe transfer and the facilitation of an illegal criminal migrant to a federal immigration agency. And so, and at the end of the day, when it comes to sanctuary policies, and bear with me here for a second, I do think that the culmination and the end of sanctuary policies always results in riots and protests. Because if sanctuary policies didn't exist, those same, say LA, for example, LA City Police would be able to safely transfer an illegal alien to ICE, because they arrested them and they have them in their jail system. But because they don't do that, and they don't have 287G, and they don't comply with detainers, they see ICE going onto the streets, they see ICE doing raids, and that leads to bad optics, and then bad optics leads to riots and protests. And so that's the end result of sanctuary policing and sanctuary city policies is, they don't adhere to detainer requests, and they don't hold illegal aliens, and they release them onto the streets. And so the federal immigration authorities have to go to the streets to find them. And if they didn't have to do that, there'd be no protest. I can almost guarantee it. And as Nick said, a riot, because protests almost always turn to riots. So I agree with him on that.
Well, what you find is that the protesters, the ones that are violent, are really not being arrested. But if you're a reporter on the scene telling the truth, or if you're a counter protester, click, you're gone. And I don't see it. Now, there was that one reporter in Portland. He has been released, charges have been all dismissed. But hey, I'm sorry, that was illegal detention, and they're going to be facing civil charges, and rightly so. I mean, we have to stand up for the rule of law in this country. If we don't, then we will have no country. Right. And that is what we're finding, because you're seeing that the increase on violence in ICE, as when the last time you were on, Hannah, a couple of weeks ago, was up 1,000%. I am afraid to hear what the current number is. Do you have that?
I don't. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's higher.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It's been trending. Unfortunately, has been trending up. I saw a report recently at 700% increase. I'm sure it's gone higher since then, especially as Hannah talked about with the negative publicity and the media spin we're seeing and making ICE the bad guy for enforcing federal immigration law, and these violent extremists on the streets of America as being the unsung heroes of American democracy. And it's really an inversion of reality. And it's really a shame that we're seeing in front of our eyes.
Now, I'm going to throw something at you, and I know I'm going to blow Hannah's mind, because now we see this culmination of all these violent protests in Chicago and Portland, New York. We're finding it all across the nation. And like I said, in my small town, we had an anti-ICE protest. But it's happening at a time of government shutdown, which means we have less law enforcement on the street on the federal level. So how do we protect these ICE agents when they're not even going to be paid? How do we pay for the National Guard when they're not going to be paid? Who's going to be there to defend us as long as we have this shutdown? I'm saying it's no coincidence these two things are happening at the same time, and why people like Chuck Schumer, and I have a personal front name for him, and it's Muck with an S in front, Schumer. I actually, on the streets of New York, debated one of the grand rabbis in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and saying, why are you supporting a man who does not support Israel? And we see what he's doing now. He will not even support Israel with the Palestinians, much less support us being protected here at home. It makes no sense to me, but that's their agenda, to destroy us, I guess.
Yeah, from the inside out. And I say the only thing we have going for us right now is how close the border is. When it comes to immigration, I mean, I think the border numbers for fiscal year 25 are the lowest that they've been since 1970. Just a little over 238,000 people were apprehended between fiscal year. So that would have been October to September. And I think, that's, we can sit here, we can Debbie Downer, and we can be upset about everything. And I think we have a right to do that. But there are some good things that are happening right now with the administration, especially with the border crossings. And if anything, our national security when it comes to that is sound. Now, the domestic security, that's a whole other issue. But I think it's worthy to note that these numbers are the lowest that they've been since the 70s. And 60% of those apprehensions in that fiscal year, were in the last 3 months of the Biden administration. So it's clearly night and day between the two administrations. And hopefully, we can get a turnaround here with the government being shut down. And hopefully, these riots won't. I do think, Annie, aren't most police officers and National Guard, aren't they working without pay? They can't all be calling in sick, right?
No, they can't be. Well, Nicholas, I'm going to ask you, are we seeing Trump do a three-pronged approach to immigration? First, he's got the southern border closed. And then in just this past week, he talked about the northern border. And people don't realize how porous that northern border is. You've got people with property. You step out the door, you're on one side, you're in the United States. You across the street, you're in Canada. And there are no fences. There are no guards or anything. That northern border is extremely porous. And we see a huge immigration of Middle Easterns coming into Canada, also influencing their politics, not only in Britain, but also in Canada. But they're also trying to do that here. So I hear him talk about the northern border, and yet I heard him also looking at clamping down on visas. That's the third prong.
Oh, and that's another. These are all great, and these are all great initiatives that the Trump administration could do, and is doing to curb total immigration to a more sustainable level. Speaking of the northern border, if I'm not mistaken, during the previous administration, we saw hundreds and hundreds of people entering through the northern border, often through ports of entry, mind you. So we don't even know really how many people are coming between the ports of entry, the known gotaways and the unknown gotaways. We all hear about the known and unknown gotaways, the millions coming through our porous southern border, but we don't really get them, like you said, and so clearly and so correctly, that we're not seeing the media is not honing in on the northern border. And we're seeing hundreds of aliens on the terror watch list being encountered at our northern border. I'm from New York, and there's like a big entry point in northern New York that's specifically egregious in terms of letting these individuals in. And that's not even counting the thousands and thousands of special interest aliens, individuals whose travel patterns have been deemed suspicious by the American government, individuals that potentially pose additional security threats to the republic, to our nation, being allowed to enter, and we're being forced to encounter these people at the northern border. And this is obviously a national security concern. And we're seeing incidents of terror across the country. And where I live in Virginia, there was at Quantico Marine Base, there was 2 illegal aliens disguised as Amazon drivers trying to gain entry into our military base there at Quantico. And both of those individuals were from the Middle East. And like you said, Ann, this is totally a national security concern. We all hear about the southern border. We need to hear more about the northern border because, like you said, it covers so many miles. It's massive. Our border with Canada is massive. And as everybody on this panel knows, Canada doesn't have the best record in terms of immigration enforcement. They're basically a giant sanctuary state themselves. So that's a potential security concern coming from the north. And like you said, President Trump is doing a great job in curbing total visas. He's been doing things with the gold card, which is debatable. We can talk about that if you'd like. Also with the H-1B program, increasing the cost of entry to $100,000 per year is a great deterrence in overflowing the system, which as we all know here, the H-1B system is not supposed to be a pathway to citizenship, and it's supposed to be a temporary guest worker program to fill in gaps in the workforce. It's not supposed to be used as a pathway to citizenship like it's currently being used right now. So, through all these great reforms, we're seeing, as Hannah said so eloquently, a great turnaround in the enforcement of our immigration system in America.
Well, you're talking to also another former New Yorker. So yeah, I know the area you're talking about very well. And when I was talking about being on the streets of Williamsburg, Brooklyn, that was the 90 precinct where I was stationed, right over the Williamsburg Bridge.
I'm outnumbered.
But I also live in the heart of the Tri-Command. I've got the Marine Corps training depot just a couple of miles one way. I got the Marine Corps Air Station the other way. I got the Naval Hospital in the middle. We're in the middle of the hoorah right here. Yeah. So next year, there's going to be one hell of a celebration for the Marine Corps and this nation. But you mentioned the H-1B1 visas, and people don't understand. They were only put in place because we had a shortage of American workers in certain fields. And the idea was that you offered the job, you put it out there for Americans to apply for first. And if you don't get a qualified applicant, then you go to the H-1B1. But companies like Disney and others used it to displace American workers. They did the exact opposite, and no one prosecuted it for the violation of the H-1B1 program, which is flabbergasting to me because I was discussing it at the time it happened. Like I said, I'm seeing Trump do a three-pronged approach. First, the southern border, then the H-1B1s, and now the northern border. And we're doing that with tariffs with Canada, too.
Yeah. To piggyback off what you both said about Canada, I think, wasn't it the President Trump who said he'd put like a 25-cent tariff on everything that came through Canada if they didn't get their border under control? And I think it worked. Unfortunately, at least in Alberta, they spent millions and millions of dollars to kind of create what they would call a border patrol. And I think, they've only, they were trying to tackle human trafficking and drug smuggling. And I think they've only found like a handful of people. So I don't know if that's because of how desolate it is up there, or maybe they may have spent millions of dollars to create this patrol unit, but maybe they're not good at what they do. But so far, they've only found I think less than 5 individuals. So it is night and day compared to the last administration. And there appears to be some gusto with this administration, especially when it comes to immigration. The fact that they were basically saying, Canada, we're going to charge you for every time we get a drug in here, or, someone here that's, illegal. And it worked. At least, the northern border, as Nick said, it used to be egregious, and the media didn't cover it. But fortunately, I think that today where we stand is, loads better. And it may take some, strong arming by the current administration, but at least they listened. And it's for the better for them too. Because, if they have less people coming through their southern border into our northern border, that inherently means they have less migrants entering into their nation. So it's better for everybody all the way around.
Yeah.
If I could just piggyback real quick with what Hannah said
ahead,
about
please
tariffs.
do.
We also saw tariffs being used as a great tool to get recalcitrant countries to take back their citizens. A lot of countries don't want to take back their citizens because, there's a lot of these people that are coming to America, they're claiming asylum, but as we all know here, I'm preaching to the choir, a lot of these people are coming here as economic migrants. They don't qualify for asylum.
No such thing as an economic, no such thing as an economic asylum. Yeah. Sorry.
And they're coming here and they're not passing the muster. They're not gaining asylum. They're not meeting the qualifications for persecution under the law. And a lot of these foreign governments are using America almost as like a dumping ground for these people, where these people would be, getting taxpayer subsidies. They would be public charges in their home country. So these countries are sending those people to America so they can so they can leech off our system and be public charges. FAIR's 2023 cost study says it's a bill of $150.7 billion per year for the American taxpayer. And those taxes we put on these countries of origin. Mexico, Venezuela, El Salvador, Guatemala, all these countries would be footing that bill. But the American taxpayer is forced to foot that bill. And it has the added benefit for these foreign governments because these individuals are sending back remittances to their home countries. So let's just say if we have an agricultural worker in Oaxaca, Mexico, they might make $5 to $10 USD in Oaxaca, Mexico. They come to America, they work off the books, they make $100, $200 a day. They send most of that money back to the country of origin. They send it back to Oaxaca, Mexico. $60, $70 in Oaxaca, Mexico goes a long, long way. That's a massive increase to the local economy of Mexico. And in parts of the Northern Triangle, remittances, which is in the billions and billions of dollars, represents like 30% of the GDP of some of these nations. So these foreign governments are prospering directly from having us, the American people, foot the bills of their people, and that's why they're not taking them back. That's one of the reasons why they're not taking them back. So that's not talked about like the media. That seems to be a theme we're having on this panel here. The media is not talking about it, but it is a thing, and the media should talk about it because it's hurting the American taxpayer and it's hurting the American worker, both skilled and unskilled.
Yeah, now I'm going to go back a little bit because not just under the Biden administration, but under the Obama administration, certain things were done that allowed, thanks to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton with Saudi Arabia, that Saudi Arabia was able to vet the individuals that they were going to send to the United States. We had no say about who was coming from Saudi Arabia. So how do we know that we didn't get ourselves thousands of terrorists? Because Saudi Arabia said, oh, they're good, they're okay, and you're pals with us. And Hillary Clinton said it's okay. Are we seeing a reversal of these policies under the Trump administration?
I'll take it. Okay.
Go ahead. Any, meeny, miny, mo.
Yeah, there's a much stronger vetting than there was. Arguably, Obama era policy vetting was stronger than Biden era, but we don't have to get into that. But no, yeah, there's significantly stronger vetting processes for entering the nation legally or illegally currently under this administration than the previous ones. We're not going to let, we let another country, vet their people before they, come over here, but that doesn't mean we're not going to vet them. We're not going to take them. We wouldn't take it at face value from an ally, especially not a country from the Middle East or Russia or China. So no, we have our own vetting processes as well. And I'd say they're quite good. We have credible fear screening for certain type of visas. And then we have the traditional screening that we do at the border if you're encountered between or at a port of entry. And instead of, it's like I said earlier, it's night and day, because the previous administration under Biden, they'd encounter someone, they really wouldn't screen them. And then they say, well, we'll give you a court date and we'll see you in 7 years. And they would release them into the interior of the nation. So we're not doing that either, so you can't have both. You can't have lax vetting and then release them. And unfortunately, the previous administration, that's exactly what they did. And right now, that's not what we're doing at all. So much better when it comes to vetting right now.
And I have to just piggyback on what Hannah said. Under the previous administration, immigration parole, which is very big here, we can get into that too. I want all the listeners and viewers to understand this. It was used as a shadow amnesty system, and Biden-Mayorkas perverted this program. This program is supposed to be used on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons or for significant public benefit to the American citizen and citizenry. Mm-hmm. And Biden-Mayorkas granted parole to over 2 million illegal aliens through wholesale executive fiat. To put this in perspective, in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, Mayorkas granted over 1 million paroles. And to put this in perspective, we talked about Obama, right? I know Hannah mentioned Obama and vetting and such. On average, Obama granted about 15,000 per year. So, and Trump, first term, he's about 5,000 per year. So we went from 15,000 under Obama, and just as Hannah stated, so rightly stated, under Biden, we're seeing a number of 15,000 burst up to 1.3 million. And this is not sustainable, and proper vetting saves lives. Proper vetting is a common sense measure, and we deserve it. As the American people, we deserve a system which cares about our safety and cares about bringing the best possible immigrant into the country so they can positively contribute to this rich tapestry of Americana that we've seen develop over the generations, not leech from the system and not hurt American citizens.
Well, he's threatened now to invoke the Insurrection Act. And on top of which, he threatened to arrest a certain governor, well, actually two of them, for interference, Pritzker and Tampon Tim Waltz. So, he's pulling a lot of rabbits out of the hat and basically saying, listen, if you are going to interfere with lawful acts of the law enforcement, the Department of Justice, ICE, DEA, immigration, whatever you want to call it, or even local law enforcement, federal marshals. If you're going to interfere with them, then that is a felony. And click, click, bye-bye, you're going, Governor. See you before the Supreme Court.
Right. And, you're 100% right. We heard from the previous administration and, no one is above the law. We heard that when you turn on the news all the time. No one is above the law. No one is above the law. And they're not wrong, but it goes for all sides of the political spectrum. It means everybody. And if any elected official, regardless of status, is aiding and abetting illegal aliens, this includes concealing, harboring, or shielding an unauthorized alien from detection, or encouraging, which we're seeing a lot of, or inducing an alien to come or enter or to reside in the United States illegally, then they are not above the law themselves, and they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law as outlined by federal law. And you're 100% right. And a lot of, the same thing goes for these rioters we're seeing in Portland and other parts of the country. Impeding a federal investigation, impeding a federal process is a crime. And we should start pursuing these things.
There's so much that's come across that I've got articles upon articles that I was going to talk about. There's one thing that really no one's talking about also is that a lot of what we're seeing in this violence against our attempt to enforce immigration laws against ICE and others is being perpetrated not just by Antifa and by the extreme left or even by the transgender, it's by the drug cartels themselves. They're losing a large income that they've been enjoying. Used to be that the cartels were stationed in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. They never crossed the border. But under the Biden administration, it was a free-for-all. So they took their manufacturing and everything. They said, well, why do we have to just worry about transporting the drugs? Why don't we just make them here in the United States now? And China abets them in sending the chemicals over. But there was this one Latin King's drug lord who placed a 10,000 bounty, let's get this straight, teeth and straight, Anne-Marie, bounty upon the, where is it? The U.S. Border Patrol official, his name, I'm looking for his name, Gregory Bovino. He was the chief commander for the Border Patrol at large. And, he puts it up on social networks saying, if you catch the guy, you get 2,000. If you kill the guy, you get 10,000. And he posted on social media. They are that blatant and brazen. And I don't think the American public realizes the danger we face because of this. They don't care. They really don't care. They'll break every single rule, and we're left with the consequences, such as the murder of this woman, DeCarla Thompson, who was murdered, a 19-year-old Maryland native. She was kidnapped. She was attacked. And her body was dumped in the river, only to be found a week later. These are actual consequences to American citizens here.
Yeah. That happened like 20 minutes from my house. I wrote an article for FAIR about that, and it's sad. It feels like regardless of how good we've got it under the
Oh, that is
administration
your
right
article.
now,
That is your article.
regardless of how good we've got it in terms of border security and immigration as a whole under the current administration, it does still feel like that every city is perpetually a sanctuary city. Every city feels like a border city because we've got a lot to clean up from the previous administration. There's been a lot of fiascos happening. And you're right, the cartels are probably angry. I mean, that's a multi-$100 billion industry. And it's been disrupted right now. And they're not just going to sit down and say, oh, okay, I guess I can't peddle drugs anymore. They're going to find a way, and they're going to do something. And a lot of times they peddle drugs legally, like through legal citizens, and so they're going to be pulling out all the stops to try and infiltrate our streets with drugs again. And so that's something maybe Nick can talk about it. But yeah, it's not going to end just because the border is secure. They're going to try and find a way. It's going to continue to happen as it always has happened. So we've got to do everything that we can to try and stop that.
They're also using drones.
They're
setting booby traps on the ranchers' properties at the border, so the ranchers don't go near there. Or we had one gentleman who got killed because he went on his own property and he stepped on an IED. I mean, I retired back in the 90s, but I lost two friends because of one was Bobby Machadi. He was escorted by a friend of mine across the border 3 times and came back to murder police officer Machadi. I went to the police academy with Eddie Burns, who was a sweetheart. He was murdered while guarding a witness's house on the orders of a drug lord already in jail. This happens. I don't think there's a family in America that hasn't had themselves affected one way or another because of the consequences of these open borders and drugs.
Yes, and 100%. I grew up in a neighborhood that was rife with MS-13 and Latin Kings and a lot of Central American gang members from the Northern Triangle countries. I grew up 3 houses down from an MS-13 trap house where they were bringing in prostitutes, drugs, gun smuggling, where there was cops going in and out. And in New York, nobody does anything. So the cops just come in and out, in and out, in and out. Me and my friends would play basketball on the street back before social media and before smartphones. We had to actually play in the street. And we were playing basketball, and they used to come out, and these gang members, these MS-13 thugs would come out, tattooed up, with a machete at his side, and just lock eyes with us, basically as a form of intimidation, and say, hey, whatever you see in that house over there, you keep your mouth shut. And you don't tell anybody, you don't tell your parents, you don't tell your teachers, you don't tell the cops, because this machete will find its way onto your neck. There was a story, and I don't know if you're familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but in Long Island, a couple people got chopped up in a park.
Brentwood.
Trump went to that. I grew up.
That's where I grew up, in Brentwood.
I'm from Central Islip.
I was born in Bayshore.
Oh, okay. So hey, we're friends. We're cousins.
Hey, forget about it.
So you know how it is in Brentwood, and you know how it is in Central Islip, and you've experienced it. And I used to go to that park with my friends. We used to go hang out around that area. And American people like myself, American citizens like myself, we deserve walkable streets. We deserve safe streets. We deserve a right to walk our children in strollers and without fear. We deserve a police department that has our best interests at heart. We deserve politicians that have our best interests in heart, not of these foreign lawbreakers, not of these foreign lobbies and interest groups. We should be first in all of these people's minds. And, these cartels, they're going to find a way to make money because at the end of the day, a human body to them is expendable. It's a variable in the equation to make the money, whether it's through drugs or human smuggling. And I don't know if your viewers are familiar with this, but we've seen reports of these cartels using social media through geofencing to target American citizens, young American citizens, as almost like smugglers, saying that if you can smuggle one person from Mexico to America, we'll pay you anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 per person smuggled. And they're actually looking to the American people as a means to further their criminal objectives. And, this can't, we're the best nation in the history of the world, and this can't stand.
No, it can't.
Nick,
I want to thank you for joining us. People can find you at fairus.org, where you work with lovely Hannah. And Nick, we got to have you back on. You're just too much fun.
Thank you.
You're a fellow New Yorker. I don't know if you're a paisan, but Nicholas, it's a possibility.
I'm Italian. Yes, I'm Italian.
Oh, then you're a paisan, and the Columbus Day is Monday. All
I
right,
know.
Nicholas. We'll be talking soon. God bless.
God bless. Have a great day.
All right. She has waited patiently in the green room, and we want to welcome onto the show. And I know I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to have to look at my notes.
You got it.
All right. Daniela Lisco. She is with the Human Trafficking Training Center. I can do that with my tongue tied.
That was pretty good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Welcome, Daniela. And you got to be
also,
another Italian. We got Columbus people
I
today.
was going to say, how could you get that name wrong? I mean, it's pure Italian. So, we're all
Well,
here.
my cousin actually sent me a note today on my phone, and there is a street in Rome that we found out that bears the name of my grandfather. So I got to find more about this. Della Vecchia. There is a street in Rome called Della Vecchia. That was my mother's maiden name.
Beautiful.
So if anyone from Rome that's listening, I want to know about that street name because it is my family. But you are from something I never even thought existed. Dan Nash started this. And you tell me the story about how this got started and what you guys do.
Sure. So the Human Trafficking Training Center was, as you said, founded by Dan Nash. And Dan was a Missouri State Trooper for 27 years. And in the course of that, the last basically 15 years of his career there, he was working with trafficking and realizing that the way that law enforcement was approaching trafficking was not right. We weren't helping the victims, and traffickers were not going to jail. And unless you have both sides of that equation, nothing is going to get solved in the trafficking world. So he, over time, sort of just developed very effective strategies to do exactly that. Number one, get victims to disclose, meaning they could actually say, yes, this is happening to me, because we have this wild misconception that, trafficking victims are going to come running to somebody and say, save me, save me. That is not happening. That's stuff for the movies, not in real life, certainly not in America. And so that was number one, is how do we get victims to disclose to an officer and get them the help they need. So anything from medical help to any number of psychological problems that these, and I'll say mostly women, because that is 90% of trafficking victims. Certainly sex trafficking, labor trafficking is a whole another issue, but we can talk about that too. But the point is, we need people to disclose their situation, number one, and that would at least help officers then investigate the traffickers. You don't need disclosure to get that investigation going, but there's the two sides of the coin. And law enforcement really is the tip of the spear to solving trafficking, because unless you can investigate, and unless you can sort of get to the trafficker and get an investigation going to them, like what's a trafficker going to do? We want to help the victims on the one hand. However, let me ask you both, you help a victim, okay, what is the trafficker going to do? The trafficker is going to just go and find more victims. That's all they're going to do. So unless both of those things are happening, there's kind of we're on this never-ending cycle of abuse, frankly. So he basically decided, he realized through a lot of trial and error and a lot of investigation and a lot of work, there are very specific ways that we can do both of those things. So the Human Trafficking Training Center has, over the last 3.5 years of its existence, traveled all over. We've been to 40 states. Actually, Dan is just coming back from Canada, where he's been training. He's been hired by Interpol in the Ukraine, training in Pakistan, in Australia.
Wow.
Because this is a global problem. But we have a very unique opportunity to solve it here in America, because for all of our faults, and we have them, we all know, and we have limitations in the criminal justice system, But we are certainly better than basically anywhere else in the world. I just heard your last guest say we're the best country in the world, and he's right. You know, we at least have a solid framework with which we can do something about trafficking here. So that's what the Human Trafficking Training Center does, is get the training out, because the other big myth is that police know what to do. And they don't. Only 17% of law enforcement is actually trained. And we think, oh, that's just, you know, small agencies that don't have the training. No, the FBI has zero training in human trafficking. DHS has zero training in human trafficking. Border Patrol, zero training. So it is impossible to address this problem properly unless we can get the, you know, sort of that front-facing group of people, law enforcement in particular, because they are in front of everybody, and they see people. And if they don't recognize something as a trafficking incident, and that this is typically what happens, nothing happens. It's not because police don't care. It's not because they're well-trained in other areas. Trafficking just takes a very specific skill set. And that's what we give. And when people start using the strategies, they are immediately finding victims. In fact, I think our record is 5 hours after walking out of a training, an officer located a victim. And I mean, that's, you know, amazing if we can sort of get more and more people trained so that they can really just do those two things: identify the victims, offer the services that they need, and get investigations going against the traffickers.
Well, I think back, because I don't know if you're aware that I am retired out of NYPD, and I think about, and this was back in the 80s. I think about the time that we would run across, you know, the hookers on the street. You know, you don't think about the fact that they're trafficking. You're thinking that they're there to get money for their drugs. You know, we were not trained to think that way.
Yeah.
And when I was reading about you, I'm thinking to myself, how many more people could I have helped if I had a different mindset at that point in time? You know, I do know the one or two that I helped, but that was inadvertently, you know, through, I just happened to be saying the right thing at the right time. But how many more could I have helped?
That's so such a good reflection, Anne, because that is exactly what we hear from, you know, we're going on 20,000 officers trained, and we hear that every single class that, you know, we leave is exactly that sentiment. It's like, damn, I just didn't know. And you know, it's beyond the police. What you've just reflected is, what about the rest of us who, I mean, I'm guilty of that. You walk down, oh, it's just, you know, a prostitute. And we have this idea that somebody is choosing this life. The reality is, and this is consistent in study after study, whether in North America, or in Europe, in Asia, about 90% of, and this is why we just prefer to call everyone a victim, because the reality is 90% of them actually are human trafficking victims, meaning they are under the control of a trafficker. Nobody chooses to be under the control of a trafficker. Now, are there renegades, meaning, yes, are there prostitutes, people that choose that life? Yes, they are not the ones standing out in the street. Those are, you know, numbers that, whatever, high net worth ball players or politicians or whoever are sort of passing around, but that's not who we're talking about. That is not the reality of human trafficking. And so that is a hugely important reflection, not just for you as retired PD, but just for all of us to remember. We need to be looking at this a little differently. This isn't just a life that somebody chooses.
Well, and, you know, I noticed that, you know, the training that you have, you know, are like for police, for firefighters, for medical work, for counselors, for probation officers, but you also have it for the local community.
We do. We have a wonderful program. It's around 4 hours long. We can shorten it up. We sometimes people request that it's a little bit shorter, just given their time constraints, but it is a in-depth training that we do for community. And it just obviously just strips away some of the investigative stuff that the professionals need. But thank you for raising that, because the reality is how do we start turning off the tap and to sort of creating this supply of trafficking victims. And we do that by also, if traffickers can go out and recognize the vulnerabilities in people, well, so can we, right? And so how do we do a better job as community members, any of us who care about kids, any of us who care about people in general? There are lots of things that we can learn to see things a little differently. It's almost like, you get a new pair of glasses to really start identifying things that are going right under our noses. And then people always ask, well, what do I do? I think this was happening. And then they're left with, well, what do I do? So that is what we try and answer for people in specific communities. And we give them resources that are specific to their communities as well that will help them.
What would you say are 3 things somebody could use as if learning from you, like if they could go to one of your trainings and they're just an average community member, they don't necessarily work in a school or a medical center, and they're not police, they're not PD. What are 3 things that somebody can keep in the forefront?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's first of all, I think, just picking up on some of what we've discussed is it can affect anybody. So we sometimes think it's only going to affect poor kids or people from this particular neighborhood. That's not the case. We see now do certain people, for example, is poverty an additional risk factor affecting people, making them more vulnerable? Of course. However, there are different vulnerabilities that span every socioeconomic scenario. So the first thing, one thing to keep in mind is this is a very non-prejudice type of crime. It can affect anybody from any walk of life, number one. Number 2 is to really think about those vulnerabilities. Us as adults, we have some good ideas. You don't need to be a psychologist. You don't need to be a teacher to clue into some of the vulnerabilities that might be affecting kids in different ways. And I say kids because this is, something that it may be easier for people to see because everybody's around kids of some kind, and we want to catch it early before they sort of kind of fall down the road of being trafficked. And then, but I do want to make clear, most trafficking is, sex trafficking at least, is adult women. Labor trafficking, adults. Most of the cases of trafficking are adults, not children. We have this idea that it's mostly children. That's not the case. But in terms of what to look for in kids, noticing those vulnerabilities is paramount. So whether it is poverty, whether it's lack of parental supervision, whether it's, a parent that has some kind of a substance addiction, whether it is a parent, it's a kid who may be very well off, but their parents are not around. Any type of thing where we know as young people, you're going to be affected by that. That's something that we should be looking out for. It's not to say that we need to jump to conclusions about, okay, well, does that mean everybody with a vulnerability is being trafficked? Of course not, but be mindful of those so that you can start addressing behavioral changes in a child that, may have some of those vulnerabilities. So trying to identify the vulnerabilities is number 2. So the first is, it can be just acknowledge it can be any socioeconomic factor. Second, any kind of vulnerability is going to be, if you can see it, then that means a trafficker can see it. So what can you do to sort of intervene there? And number 3 is probably just, outward signs of abuse, signs of anything that is, physically not right. Is somebody not wearing the right clothing? Are they showing signs of abuse of some kind? We teach, it's hard to do now, but there's certain tattoos, for example, that are very typical on trafficking victims. We try and sort of help people identify
get branded.
What to look for. Yeah, and it's not considered so much a branding thing. It's really just, but you can think about it that way. That's fair. It's just certain things that are going to show up more prevalently on a trafficking victim. So there's a gazillion different factors, but if you narrow it down to those those little baskets, that might help people kind of keep things in mind that they can really do. You can do a lot as just a community member, for sure.
I'm thinking also the effect of social network and now the growth of AI. Are traffickers using these things to find their victims and pull them in?
Well, so they certainly have been using social media. How they end up using AI, maybe, but at the moment, it's not really been hard for traffickers to find victims at all. It's literally a matter of a few days before it's very. You think, how can that possibly be? Like what person, what child, what even adult would go and meet a trafficker just by seeing them online? Well, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of time. It does not take months and months of time to develop a relationship such that type of meeting can happen. 1 in 5, these are statistics from NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. 1 in 5 kids are suspected of being trafficked. 1 in 5 runaways, and I think it's 1 in 6 kids in the foster care system. That's a lot of people. Those are a lot of children. I'm sure AI will make it easier at some point. I don't even know that we need to be worrying about that yet, because there's enough to worry about just based on existing.
Well, the reason why I asked about AI, there was a study recently of kids and whether or not they've entered into a relationship with an AI. And they're saying 40% of the kids have now found themselves in a relationship with an AI image, creation, whatever you want to call it, and as if it's a real person. And I was reading about a young kid, I think he was like 13, 14 years old, open up on the social network, and the individual was convincing him to take pictures of himself. And then once he had those pictures, he was saying, well, now you're going to meet me. Otherwise, I'm going to expose these pictures all over the place,
right?
Which is a perfect AI, not AI, but a trafficker's trick on social network. But if they're now in a relationship with an AI individual, how well could a trafficker use that to lure them in also now?
Well, so your point, is very, very good. We should also distinguish, though, what you're probably alluding to more is a predator versus a trafficker, which is 2 very different criminals with very different intentions. So a predator, I can see, yes, you're absolutely right. That would be an even easier way to, kind of get in front of a young person. A predator is really just after their own sexual gratification. A trafficker is trafficker's main motivation is money, and so those are 2 wildly different crimes. Well, they are presented.
Well, the reason why I mentioned AI, because I'm remembering a story. I've got these wheels go in my head nonstop like a little gerbil, but a story that was, I believe, 2 years ago, that a woman was recruited through an AI. And then she was convinced to bring other individuals with her. So this was for trafficking.
Okay.
She managed to get away from it. And the other young ladies were not trafficked, but they were able to use it. And this is a couple of years ago, and how AI has now developed so sophisticated in just months compared to years. I can imagine it would be the perfect platform for them to try to recruit. So you create one, all right, you bring your girlfriends. The same thing that Jeffrey Epstein was doing. Hey, listen, you bring your girls in, and but he was doing it face to face. But how well can they do it now through AI?
Sure, yeah, and make it even, I guess, more efficient from the trafficker's perspective. There's less people involved, and again, more dollars. But you're right. I mean, there's endless ways in which to abuse those vulnerabilities. I think that's the point. And you're right. We need to. I can't even like you, my brain's sort of kicking off a number of all kinds of applications in which that can be used. It's pretty scary, but it comes down to the same thing, which is however they are recruited. And, that's from the community perspective, we want to obviously try and slow down the flow of those victims getting into the life, because once they're in, the trauma that is, that people face is terrible. Takes years of all kinds of things, therapy and different modalities to sort of recover from that. I mean, these are women that have, forced to have sex with whatever, 10 to 15 guys a day.
We're down to our last few minutes. I'm looking at the clock and I'm going, holy cow, this show is going so fast, right, Hannah? We've just been nonstop.
Many things to talk about, yeah.
But the one thing I do want to mention is that they can go to the website, the Human Trafficking Training Center. Is it .com or .org?
.com.
Okay, I apologize for that. But they can sponsor a training session. So they don't have to basically get involved in doing the training themselves or taking the training, but they can sponsor it. Say, for example, a local small law enforcement agency or a community church or a community center. They can sponsor the training. How much is an average training session? So
training is typically $6,000 per class. And to be clear too, we run as a for-profit business. We cover expenses and that kind of thing. But the reason we do that is, the unfortunate reality in trafficking is that there's thousands and thousands of organizations. There have been, I mean, at this point, billions of dollars that have been poured into trafficking. Unfortunately, none of that money is, gone to really help victims. We have a problem that has grown exponentially. So for all the money that has been poured into it, unfortunately, we've not done a great job of using that. So we didn't want to sort of join that club. We run as a for-profit business. But people all the time want to sponsor. They see the results that we've had and they want to sponsor training. So they are able to do that. But we're also, happy to talk to people about getting a community class for a specific location as well. That's another thing that people like to.
So if we have like a small community group, we can pass the hat around. Once we get 6,000 or more, we can send a donation in.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You don't, if you can't afford 6,000 yourself, pass the hat around to friends and neighbors.
You
can sponsor a group.
Absolutely, and that's exactly how it's happened. We have had organizations also. Rotary has been a sponsor, and other Our Rescue. Other organizations have seen what we do, love what we do. And the reality is we've produced results. When people leave the training, we get stats. We ask the officers to send us stats on who they're, who they're discovering and what victims they've contacted, what victims have accepted services. So we actually have, we keep those stats and we're able to pass those on to people who sponsor the classes so they know that something is actually being done in their jurisdiction.
Well, Daniela, thank you for joining us. I mean, we're down to our last 3 minutes, and I can't believe this, but people can go to humantraffickingtrainingcenter.com and learn more. We got to have you back and get Dan on himself, Dan the man.
At some point, absolutely. And if there are nurses out there listening or law enforcement, the training is free for professionals, so they should definitely sign up. The agency will pay our fees. But we try and, again, just to get the information out there. We want as many law enforcement and nurses attending as we can. So
fantastic. Thank you very much, Daniela.
Thank you.
Enjoy your Columbus Day weekend.
Happy Columbus Day. Thank you both.
All right. And we have Hannah, next week, we have Janet Heisel from the Epic Times, and she's going to be talking about a lot of things that you and I were talking about today. So that's going to be great. She's got a new article she's been working on Antifa. So I think parts of it was starting to come out today. Also, Bernie Flowers had ran for Congress a few times. A friend of mine, Kirikos Zira, recommended him. So we're going to have Bernie with us as well as Janice. So you'll be with us next week.
For sure. Yeah. I think we had some great guests today. Especially, she was fascinating. And just, I'll try to keep those three tidbits she sent. She told us on air in my head. And, and I hate to tie everything back to the border, but, with an open border comes more human and drug trafficking and more labor trafficking. So it's a good thing it's closed. We're still going to have this industry. I think transnationally, it's a $230 billion industry plus. I mean, there's so much money in this. So if anybody can just, like you said, pass the hat around, get a training, it can save a life. It will save a life. So I've seen their website. I've seen the fruits of their labor, and that was a fascinating guest we had. So was Nick. So this was a great show. So.
Well, thank you, Hannah, for joining us. And like I said, we'll be back next week. The Bernie Flowers and Janet Heisel. Be an exciting show and always fun. Always fun to have you. You know we love you.
Thanks for having me. If anybody wants to find anything, what I'm doing, you can find me on Twitter at Immigration HD, and you can also go to fair.us.org to see what we're doing. So thanks for having me, Annie, and I look forward to being here next week.
All right. Until then, God bless. Enjoy the Columbus Day holiday. All right.
Well,
all right. Hannah will be with us. Curtis will be back with us in 2 weeks. But with that said, I'm out of time, and that's all we got going for now. The following week we have James Bradley who will be joining us, and we will have a special guest either from the Epoch Times or from other areas such as that. Every other week, a friend of mine, Victoria, sends us a special surprise guest every 2 weeks. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So with that, I will say good night and God bless.